Digital identity. You've probably seen the headlines, right? The crazy growth, the futuristic iris scanners. It's a world that's just buzzing with these huge promises of privacy, security, and giving you control. But, behind all that hype, there's a very different story unfolding. So let's get into it and try to separate what's real from what's just a mirage.
This one quote, it just absolutely nails the central problem with the digital identity market today. We've got these brilliant billion-dollar companies forging these incredibly sophisticated digital keys. But there's this really nagging question. What doors are they actually supposed to open?
And that question gets way more urgent when you see a number like this. $280 billion. That's the projection for the digital identity market by 2034. So think about that. We have this massive, massive market and a really fundamental problem of, what's it even for? That's the core conflict we're going to unpack right here.
All right, so where is all this money and all this energy actually coming from? Well, it's all built on a multi-billion-dollar promise to solve one of the internet's most pressing problems.
And the number one reason for this gold rush? Generative AI. For the first time in history, digital forgeries and these hyper-realistic deepfakes are actually more common than physical counterfeits. This has made the old ways of verifying who you are pretty much obsolete. And that has created this desperate, almost frantic demand for solutions that can prove you're actually human.
And you can see exactly where that hypergrowth is happening on this chart. The whole market's growing at a really healthy clip, right? 16 to 21%. But then look at the submarket for decentralized identity, or DID. It is exploding at a rate 3 times faster. This is a huge signal that a massive architectural shift is happening. We're moving away from these giant centralized databases and toward a world where you control your own identity. You hold the keys, not some big tech company.
And leading this charge are 2 totally different kinds of players. You've got the futuristic, crypto-loving upstart. And then you've got the deeply entrenched, government-connected incumbent. So on one side, you've got Worldcoin, with its sci-fi orb, trying to build this global proof-of-personhood network totally from scratch. And on the other, you've got ID.me, which has basically become this quasi-public infrastructure in the US, verifying identities for 152 million people against government records. They're both going after the same problem, but their core beliefs, their user bases, and their biggest headaches, they could not be more different.
And this gets us to the actual user experience, because while the vision is just grand, the reality on the ground can be pretty messy. This quote from a real user, it highlights a huge hurdle for a lot of these new technologies. If the app is clunky or it just doesn't work, it doesn't matter how revolutionary the idea is, people just won't use it.
Okay, so we've got the promise, we've got the players, but here is where the story takes a really sharp turn. It's time for a reality check and to get back to that core idea of a key without a lock.
This is the problem in a nutshell. You have a solution, like World ID, offering this single, powerful key. But it's trying to open all these different doors that have very specific, legally required locks. A bank, for instance, has its own Know Your Customer compliance lock. A European company has a GDPR lock. This one-size-fits-all key, it just doesn't fit these very specific, real-world requirements.
And that really gets to the heart of the mismatch here. Proof of personhood was designed to solve a very specific problem, stopping one person from creating a bunch of fake accounts to game the system in things like crypto airdrops. And look, that's a real problem if you're in Web3. But for a bank, their problem isn't knowing if you're a unique human, it's knowing which human you are, where you got your money, and if you're on a sanctions list. It's a fundamental mismatch between the problem and the solution.
And this whole mismatch just gets amplified when you look at the global regulatory mess. There is no one-size-fits-all. You've got fragmented laws in the US, fears of government spying in the EU, and a completely state-controlled system in China. The idea of a single global identity system just runs headfirst into a giant wall of sovereign laws and competing political agendas.
The story of Block's TBD is just a perfect cautionary tale. Backed by Jack Dorsey, it had this huge vision for a new, decentralized web. But by 2024, it was shut down. So why? Well, because as a public company, Block had to focus on products that would make money, and soon. It just goes to show you how incredibly hard it is to fund this kind of long-term open source work when your shareholders are demanding results every quarter.
So, after all that criticism, is this whole space just a failure? No, not at all. The real, valuable innovation is happening. It's just, it's a lot less glamorous. It's about solving real and honestly, kind of boring problems.
The path forward for the companies that are actually succeeding is pretty clear. First, they solve one specific, painful problem. They're not trying to boil the ocean. Second, they speak the language of compliance. They make a regulator's life easier, not harder. And third, they focus on the immediate win, creating reusable bits of data that save us all from filling out the same stupid forms 100 times.
And we are already seeing this in action. Reusable Know Your Customer credentials for banks are slashing their onboarding costs. Patient-controlled health records are making clinical trials way more efficient. And there's this whole new field emerging called Know Your Agent, which is all about verifying the actions of autonomous AI so you have a clear audit trail back to a human. These are real, tangible wins happening right now.
Okay, so let's zoom all the way out and see how this all fits into a much, much bigger picture. Because this isn't just about cool new tech, it's about building the fundamental trust layer for the entire next era of the internet.
Ultimately, what all of this is building towards is the construction of a new frontier of trust online. We're moving beyond just verifying your identity to something much deeper, proof of human. In an internet that is about to be flooded with AI agents and synthetic content, being able to reliably prove who is human, well, that becomes the most critical piece of infrastructure of all.
So what this all really boils down to is a simple, powerful fact. The fight over how we build these systems, whether they're centralized or decentralized, corporate or state-run, this is a battle for the very definition of what trust means online for the next 100 years. And that leaves us with one final and, I think, pretty provocative question. As we go deeper and deeper into the age of AI, who do you think should have the ultimate power to define, to verify, and to control our digital selves? The choice we make between these different paths is going to shape not just our technology, but our society.